So yeah, it's been a very big year for TypeDB. And I think the first thing to do is introduce myself. I'm Cal, CEO of TypeDB, or interim CEO. I joined the business a little over a year ago with a view to commercializing the company. Um, Hi, Mark. Oh, hi, Matt, even. My background is as a product-focused tech entrepreneur. I've built and scaled a number of businesses and sold others. And the goal was to come here and bring that sort of commercial angle to TypeDB. And at this time, it was probably the right time to do so. We've been around for a little over 10 years with the idea that we could build a novel database that had a different approach to the world. And coming at the start of this year, we delivered TypeDB 3, which is what we believe to be the most commercially viable version of the business after we spent some time rebuilding it in Rust and extending the language further and allowing it to do more things from the early Graken days of 2019-20. So now that we've reached that phase, it means that we can shift from what has historically been a research-focused organization to a commercial company. And that's really what the big focus is for us today and has been for the last few months and going forwards, is figuring out what part to play TypeDB has in the database world. We're all quite early in that journey, and so a very important part of that is to work with the builders. Everyone here who has met me, and Joshua, you know that right now we are in listening mode. We really want to talk to as many people as possible to understand how people are interacting with TypeDB, how you're finding it to use, what you find are the challenges, what do you think are the things that are missing. We want to understand what are the things that we should be doing as a company to make sure that we're building the right technology for the long term. We believe very firmly that TypeDB is a very powerful tool and that it has really interesting use cases in intelligent systems, in agentic apps, in complex data models. And seeing the way people are using it, we're finding a great deal of validation in that. So really the main message for me at the moment is I want to hear from everyone. We all want to hear from everyone. As you will see from our Discord community, we interact a lot. We want to talk a lot, and we're all very happy to arrange calls and discuss with people. Now, internally, you'll see that also we've basically had this great conversation where we said that everyone should be as chatty and engaged and interactive as they can and want to be. And it's amazing to see how well the TypeDB team is just diving in and chatting to everyone. And that's super important for us. And we want to be there for everyone because we learn so much from those conversations. And so it helps us build this company. And it's also just a lot of fun. Um, Over the next few months, we're very, very focused on improving that developer journey. Our goal is to make it as frictionless as possible for someone to come in and learn about what TypeDB is, what it represents, and then how to actually take that to a production environment. With that early shift to commercialization, we still haven't got the right answer to that. So there's going to be speed bumps along the way. And so we want to hear the things that cause issue. We want to hear the challenges so that we can clear those speed bumps out. And that's super important to us. Our goal, number one, is we want to build long-term relationships so that you find that use for TypeDB and that use becomes something that's very important to your system ad infinitum. And so we want to facilitate that journey. Like that is our leading North Star, is building those things that support the customers. So that's sort of the main things I personally wanted to go through today. From my side as a sort of commercially focused person who sort of grumbles around in the background here. But I wanted to give the floor to Joshua, who wants to talk about some of the things that we've recently done, about the technology that we've delivered, about our benchmarks, about vibe querying, about our new studio. We basically have a very long list of very exciting things that we as a company have delivered. And so I'd be happy to hand over to him, but very briefly to introduce him. Josh is our CTO. He stepped into that role earlier this year. He has been a driving force of building the technology for 7 years. So he's had a long tenure going through so much here and has met so many more of you than I have, I think. And so it felt like a completely right thing. So I will hand you over to Joshua.
Hi guys. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm also excited to see so many of familiar faces from through the years. Dixit, Richard, there's a bunch of you. So really, Angus. So I think I'm really happy to see that you guys are still here and still building on TypeDB. And yeah, to kind of pick up from where Callum left off, I think we've always had the instinct and the belief of what TypeDB can be to the world, and we're trying to make that fourth category of database, data, general purpose database, alongside and generalizing relational and graph databases. And so we think we've got a point now where the technology is mature enough to deliver production value and performance at scale. And we're now focused on improving the ecosystem around TypeDB and helping all of you guys, our builders, our advocates, our community, do the things you need to do. And we've done a lot of things in the last year in particular since the release of 3.0, but going back even with the beginning of the development of TypeDB Cloud to facilitate those things. So just to give a couple of highlights from the beginning of this year, we did a big overhaul of our docs. We did an overhaul of our website. We did an overhaul of our cloud platform and added some new things, which I will go through in a second, on top of stabilizing the core and beginning the rewrite of our highly available cluster into Rust as well. So there's a lot of moving parts happening on in the background, and you're going to see a uptick in the cadence of tools and improvements to this to the system and the stack we're providing in the next months and year. So I think that's all really exciting as someone who's been working with our highly talented team on building the core technology. It's really fun now to look outward a little bit and bring all of you into what we're doing. I think what I want to do is feel free to throw in any questions as you have them, and I will either pick them up if it fits in the moment or pick them up at the end as a more of a Q&A. But please do jump in anytime. So just to start, I wanted to share and show a couple of things. I know we've all come to TypeDB in different ways. You'll see we have our new website now. Callum, should I do the layout thing? Should we try it? Hello. Hi, everyone. You can have me at the same time.
Indeed.
Um, so, and Callum, I don't see the chat now, so if someone sends a message in, you can just read it out or let me know.
That sounds good.
Great. So we've done a lot of work moving from being a research type team to one that's actually accessible to everyone. So we've done a big push on simplification. So you'll see our front page has changed, simplified. We have much simpler examples throughout. We've kept some of the things that we got feedback on from some of you on what really was effective and worked for you. So showing the code. We are still and will always be an engineering first organization, and we are always focused on doing things right. So whatever it is that you think is the most accessible way to learn about TypeDB and understand it and continue building, we're super interested in hearing it. Um, some of you who've been here since the Kraken days, when we were almost exclusively a knowledge graph platform, will see knowledge graphs surfacing again. And that's kind of mirroring what's happening in the industry and the ecosystem, where they are making a comeback with a vengeance now. And everyone's talking about knowledge graphs. So while moving from Kraken to TypeDB is to represent the symbolism of and the cachet of being a general purpose database and not constrained to knowledge graphs, it's definitely still one of the main properties that TypeDB has is being suitable for knowledge graphs. And building on top of that, any kind of intelligent systems, semantic driven models, all of these things that um, hello, yes, first questions. Okay, I'll take that one at the end. And so we will continue to simplify as we provide more in the ecosystem and explain what we're doing. So you'll see more content, more articles, more tutorials, more integrations. So that's the website. So most of you will have met TypeDB Studio, which is now web-based. No, and you can download it as a local package. But basically, this is our go-to, along with a console for interacting with TypeDB without installing anything serious or building anything. So you can connect to a local server, you can connect to a cloud server that's running in TypeDB Cloud, you can connect to anything that's accessible over an HTTP port, and you can do all kinds of things. For instance, I've here loaded our demonstration social network data set, and you can visualize the schema. Another thing you can do is you can run queries. So I don't know if I want to say match $x is a place, and we can run these queries, and it all runs in browser without you having to install anything. This is an evolution from the old days, from Kraken Workbase to the Java-based TypeDB Studio, Kotlin-based TypeDB Studio, which was only local, up to the web-based platform that we have now, which is available both in web and locally. Some of you will have now already met, but this is a highlight of our sneak peek um, agentic interface to TypeDB. So if you are unsure about what you want to do or want some help, I don't know, write me a query for retrieving all places, something like this. This is running on OpenAI's GPT-5, and sometimes it still makes mistakes, so we couldn't edit it directly in here. And I don't know why it didn't render as a chat. Okay, that's interesting. Of course, it's the Murphy's Law, right? But you can normally take these and stick these back into the errors back in, and it'll do a pretty good job of trying to fix it itself. So again, this chat and on our website and our docs, if you look at, here we go, run, can do a couple of iterations on trying to fix this. Yeah, all right. Well, this hasn't been the best demo of the Vibe querying. Some work to do there, but please try it out and give us feedback, because we are trying to find the right balance of speed and correctness and training our own model, which we haven't started doing yet, and we're trying to see if we have to do. Another thing that lots of you are using is our docs, and we have a chat bot. Here we go. So a lot of you are using this to ask chat questions to our docs and our system, and this is a really helpful way to get help if you want to try to do it without a human in the loop. But as Callum said, we are so happy to be reached out to in Discord, because the more we hear from you, the more we learn about what you're building and what you need. And every interaction that you have with us is always going into our minds and our roadmap into building the next set of features and improvements for the product. What else have we got going? Well, many of you will have encountered TypeDB Cloud. This is totally free. This is our development team, but you have your own version of this when you create your own cloud account. It's fully free to start, and we'll always have to have a free tier. You can upgrade the size of the machine as you go. But one of the things we've added here is the security center. So let me just log myself in. So this is our internal team for testing purposes, and you can see that, for instance, it'll tell you when you have MFA that you should have enabled for your team, and it'll give you a little score and recommendations for security policies to improve your team's usage of the platform. Excellent. Okay, so people are answering questions in the chat. Happy to see it. So this is the security center. That was a big improvement, along with MFA this year and a bunch of other stuff like backups that have come into TypeDB Cloud, which you can enable. I don't think I've missed anything there, Sam, Callum, let me know if I have. But we will continue to improve Cloud, and we're always happy to hear feature requests and any issues you run into. Now, aside from the more product-facing things, outward-facing product changes, we've done a bunch of work in terms of making TypeDB stable and fast, and also talking about that. So I think historically, and you might all agree, we have a lot of things that are possible and work really well with TypeDB, and we don't talk about it well enough, and we don't talk about it enough. So we'll be putting some effort into being more communicative, publishing more, writing stuff up more frequently. But one of the big ones that people have been asking about since probably since the day I joined the company about 7 years ago, was benchmark. So we're at the point where the product is competitive and surpassing Neo4j, which was always our long-term goal and one of our common comparison points. And this was just our first push into optimizing the Rust version of our database. And we haven't really done a whole lot beyond that. It was 1 or 2 months of, unblocking the key parts of Rust, but we will be doing a lot more work on that in the future. But we're finding from our users like you guys right now that compared to 2.0 especially, things are blazing fast and handling your workloads. We've recently tested beyond the 100 gigs of data that we were running here up to a terabyte and beyond, and that was running just fine. So everyone that was there in Kraken 1.x days where the system crashed after 25 gigs because it ran out of memory, or 2.x when you tried to load 200 gigs and you had to restart your data loader 5 times because something went wrong. That is no longer the case, and people are running this very successfully at scale. All right, so happy to be take field questions about this benchmark, but do read it up, read it. We put a bunch of effort into making it accessible and extracting some of those insights for you. I would say that this blog was announced in kind of also and marking the first part of a new phase and a new project that we're taking on, which we call Project Elrond. Oh, hi, Eddie. Is it scaling up or scaling out? So yeah, right now this is a single node, and our next step is to cluster it, which is a raft-based replication, which will be single writer master and many readers, so you can scale out reads horizontally. And then partitioned writes are something we have on our mind, but a lot of the industry is showing that, for instance, like if you look at what Superbase is doing with Postgres, it's single master writer and many readers. So we're not entirely convinced that the use cases that people are using TypeDB for right now need that massive, massive CockroachDB, Spanner, FaunaDB type scalability on writes. But definitely the reads will be scalable. Yeah, and we'll look toward making it geo-replicated availability for reads and stuff as well. As soon as we get some signs that that's what people need for their products. Great. So benchmarks, yes. So leading into this was the beginning of what I would call, and actually, Callum termed Project Elrond ecosystem. The ecosystem, that's the E in Elrond, I guess, is improving the accessibility, the usage, the developer experience around TypeDB. So not only making people comfortable with the performance, but doing things like writing and updating some of our examples that we have. TypeDB CTI is one of those. So we have a cybersecurity repository, which is us building a real, basically, product. I'm told that this is something that people sometimes sell in the cybersecurity world access to these kind of servers that have the support for STIX, which is an open source ontological standard for data exchange in cybersecurity. But basically, we rebuilt this in 3.0 from 2.0 with general data loading capabilities and data extraction capabilities. So if you're coming from the cybersecurity world, you can basically use this to build the basis of your cybersecurity database. And we've seen people do that successfully. And one of the benefits of TypeDB is really you can then stack your own schemas on top, stack your own models, extend it, add other data sources, mutate this, whatever you want. It's all open source, so you can do it and pull it into your own internal systems, even if they're private. And I would say that this is just one of them. I think if you go to our docs, you'll see other data sets are coming up or coming out. They are here under use cases. So we were given a real world robotics data set and schema from the University of Callum, jump in. I forget where. Delft. And this is a real demonstrable robotics data set that we have the repository for using TypeDB to store navigational information. And then we have another example here, which has been a long time example of TypeDB using it for role-based access management and resource IAM kind of modeling, which is somewhere where TypeDB really shines as well. And so, as with anything in the our ecosystem, and what we've been saying on theme today is anything else you want to see, use cases, please let us know. You can send us an email, let us know in Discord. We're always listening, and as we get insight into what people want to see, we reprioritize where our resources are going. So there will be work toward the AI space, the agentic space. We see a lot of users wanting to integrate agentic systems into their applications and then talk to TypeDB, for instance. So we're looking at MCP servers, we're looking at generation of TypeQL queries, we're looking at tools integrations into Olama and stuff like that. So please come talk to us, let us know. Lots of you have already given excellent insights into what you would like to see. In terms of everything from what our error messages should look like to what MCP servers we could have. And I please ask you to invite more discussion to us on those things. All right. I think that's kind of the breadth of the ecosystem development and some of the product development. We have a lot of exciting things coming down the pipe besides more ecosystem development. One of them is our cluster in Rust. So the highly available TypeDB 3 is not out just yet. It will be in a couple of weeks. So we are basically the same rewrite we did in Rust for the core. We're doing it in the cluster. So if you have any questions about that, we're happy to field them. We have Ganesh, who is our head of architecture and running that project with us on the call. And we have some other things, including, for instance, enhancements to TypeQL that have been asked for a long time, like optionals in the queries and optional conditional writes, which make a whole lot of use cases a lot easier. So keep an eye out for exciting things coming down the pipe. Keeping an eye out for community projects. We've had some fun recent interactions in Discord where people are posting their own ORM Pydantic extensions for TypeDB, which is just awesome to see because that's something we were going to start looking at soon. So we will maybe join efforts or be inspired, or say that's already what we need. We're looking at seeing, well, so we've seen some CSV to TypeQL data loading platforms. We've seen people write IDE plugins for themselves, just vibe coding it quickly, vibe coding it, vibe coding it up for themselves locally. So we love seeing these projects and your guys' enthusiasm in the community, and want to say a big thank you. Great. Okay, we have a couple of questions already coming down. I think, Callum, unless you have other big topics you want to talk about, I think it's a good time to switch into more Q&A. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable. I also do want to call out the just increasing and exciting research that we've seen being published over the last
Yes.
6 months. We've, even aside from the university in Delft, which produced a pretty amazing piece on what they've termed the Rosa principles for robotics that supports self-adaptation in autonomous robots. But we've also seen some really, really interesting work on how TypeDB can be used as a knowledge graph within scientific research. We've seen some really interesting piece come out just a couple of weeks ago about SATCOMs, which was really cool. Right. There's another piece that's coming down the pipeline that's not public yet, but looks like it's going to be really interesting. There's just a lot of really interesting stuff going around this, and we absolutely love it. I mean, I voraciously scan the internet for these references, and yeah, it's really exciting for everyone here when we see these different community projects, these research pieces about how people are working with TypeDB.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think we've probably had 2 or 3 papers come out powered by TypeDB in the last year. And some of the authors reach out to us and ask for help. Um, we're always open to helping and providing insight into best ways to model and how to integrate things with TypeDB. But yeah, the research side has been popping off, and it's really cool to see.
yeah. But
Great.
yeah, I think that's the majority of the cool things we want to share, but largely we wanted to create an open forum for people to interrogate and learn and see what we think on different things. And for your reference, Josh, if you scroll back up to 546, you have an initial question from Daniel Mante.
Oh yeah, a dev environment where we can set breakpoints, inspect variables about expressions. Yeah, so we don't have that yet. I would love to see that. I don't actually have a good scope on how much work that is. We are starting to put some things together that will improve the developer experience. So um, we are adding a new endpoint to TypeDB, which is as opposed to executing a query, you can analyze a query, which will give you the type annotations and allow you to look at what the query structure is as the server sees it and how it's maybe it's got any errors or type annotations or variables being lost that you didn't expect. So that'll be helpful. And I foresee that leading into, for instance, the implementation of a language server protocol, which would be kind of the beginning of this development environment where you can have IDE interactions more native using an LSP. So I think going as far as interactively evaluating expressions might be a little bit more ambitious, but definitely improving the developer experience in your IDE via a language server protocol like you're used to for all of your systems, all your programming languages. Um, that'll be the first step. And then, yeah, if it's not too big of a step to go to evaluating stuff on the fly, would love to see that. And we'll have a look at it for sure. Okay, then Daniel, fitting into the WebAssembly system interface. Um, I'm not entirely familiar what the WebAssembly system interface is. I'm gonna take two guesses. I believe you did say later, yep, embedding it into as a function. Right, so it's a great question. Um, yes, would love to. We haven't yet thought about the security and API implementations of doing so. Um, and oh, interesting. Okay, so WebAssembly is standardizing a bunch of components. Yeah, so I think yeah, this is tying to something we've been hearing a bit recently, especially with regard to the Kuzu shutdown, or at least the company behind Kuzu shutting down or changing focus. If it keeps being a if it becomes a feasible thing to integrate a different backend or different storages for TypeDB, such as a key value, any kind of key value store, as long as it hits certain requirements we have, is something we would look at. It is a non-trivial piece of engineering, I would say. But if we see a lot of pull in that direction, I see it as a possible thing to do. Right now, we're pretty focused and seeing a lot of adoption with the current RocksDB plus Rust stack that we have, which is pretty battle tested in the industry and scales really well. And then still running as a standalone server. But yeah, there are worlds where you get a different backend that you can embed in various systems. You could even run in the browser. We just haven't got the bandwidth to prioritize that right now, given that the RocksDB based TypeDB is scaling and growing well. But again, as with discussion goes, you saying these things puts it in my mind and my team's mind, and we now keep our eye to the community and see what everyone's building. And it puts it on our radar. So that's as important as anything that we do. Thank you for that. That's an excellent line of questioning, and I will be looking at the WASI standardization system that's happening. It does address some of the discussions we had internally about how do you do certain storage operations if they're standardizing that in the browser. All right. Up and out scaling, we handled that. Great. So Studio, hi Dixit. Studio is extended to include a simple but functional UI to allow data to be loaded without having to write code. Indeed. So we're seeing one of our actually clients creating some helpers for themselves to go easily from CSV to TypeDB. This space of getting TypeDB from, say, CSV and JSON into TypeDB is something we're looking at actively because we understand that it is something that people stumble on and they have to write their own solutions frequently. I would love to see something integrated into Studio. I think first we need to standardize what we expect that exchange to look like. But yeah, I can see that there's personally, I think I see about possibly like 3 years of things we can do on Studio if we had a whole team on it. So it's just a matter of prioritization. And yeah, I think since it is the entry point to Studio, having an easy way to get data in would be, I think, a big part. All right. Agentic chat as a client for flexible implementation. Good question. So we're still debating this internally. We definitely want to. That's why the chat is an alpha. As you saw, it doesn't always do what you expect. And there's an interesting trade-off right now with speed of response and accuracy, and we're trying to hit the middle ground, and it's still not ideal. So we are working on that. But then once we've figured out that the experience is good enough for the standard we expect and the quality we expect, we will do probably firstly expose the API that is powering Studio to do the chat interface as part of your TypeDB cloud account. So um, you can then access it from your own API. And then as we make improvements to the TypeQL generation capability at our endpoint, your model will do what your application will get better as well. The alternate tack of this, since we haven't fully set on it yet, is if you want to know how we're doing it, and I think we will write a blog on how we're doing it, and then you can also try to emulate its behavior using your own models, because some people like to use the pre-built API to generate queries, and some people want to hack around with their own models or train something or make much longer system prompts than we have. So we're going to try to provide that flexibility. Good. More WASI things. Developing a general graph store API that could include the TypeQL model. Okay, yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, so under the hood, TypeDB is well, TypeDB under the hood boils down to a hypergraph, which boils down to a graph, which boils down to key value stores, um, which is stored in a kind of hybrid columnar row based store, depending on which direction you traverse the data under the hood. So the idea of a general graph store would probably be something we could map to if you had a general graph store API. Yes, I think that works. In my mind, ideally we would stay in control of the graph layer in TypeDB because we haven't built the abstraction of the graph. We have the abstraction of the key value store. So a new general key value store that supports certain ordered iteration and stuff like that, we should be able to translate TypeQL to TypeDB to the storage layer. TypeQL paper, there's a reference to formal semantics. Wait, what? Uh, so I am haven't seen this.
I think it's
Uh-huh.
the Christoph question.
This is a Christoph question. I think that this is not written, quote, yet. Uh, I will have to feel that one to quiz Christoph. And if you wanna pop that question. Yes, sorry, Krishnan, I should read out the questions. Good question. There's a question just to the panelists. Basically, there's a paper, our paper, TypeQL, a type theoretic and polymorphic query language, with a reference to a paper, Formal Semantics of the Type Theoretic Language TypeQL, which is marked as in preparation. I wonder if that is a derivative piece of a paper or a talk or something like that. I'm not sure. Or if it's something that Christoph was trying to write and then he's now gone on to other things while being a consultant and not having time to work full time on formalization. But if you shoot me this, I'm going to write this question down, or if you shoot me an email with this question or Discord message, I will send it to Christoph and I will get back to you on that. Um,
Excellent, Christoph.
yeah, we can feel it to Christoph.
We also have a question from Reza in the Q&A one, just to have a
Uh-huh.
different destination.
Is this one you
He's,
want to take?
Reza has asked, might have missed it, but are we going to have triggers for pipelines and functions?
Yeah, good question. What do you mean by trigger? So two versions of trigger. One is as in trigger, you invoke the function and then it runs. So fine. I think you're more interested in probably executing something when something else happens, right? So we've had this question a couple of times, and I think there's definitely scope for implementing a simple version of this. There are basically uh implementations of it where you can say when there is a new instance of this type or this type of connection or something like this is deleted, then do this. Um, Yeah, like say an update happens on an attribute. Yeah, I think there's scope for that. There's a question of what happens then, right? So if you want to say then do some other writes potentially, maybe there's a system that does that, but the whole pipeline from when something happens in the systems to notifying a client-side listener that we haven't got right now. And I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's actually crazy hard either to listen to a particular type of event on a single attribute or an entity or relation. Um, so that could be put on the roadmap if we see the use cases for it and it being a general feature. I will say it's not on the short-term roadmap, but it could be on the medium-term roadmap if we see the pull in that direction. Um, since we've had that a couple times, it might that's the kind of these kind of questions are the um things that give it weight in our minds. So if you keep asking and we keep hearing, and then that's how things change in our roadmap. All right. So let's see. Yeah, I think Reza, I think my answer to your question with you could envision a version where on a trigger you rewrite do another update elsewhere in the database. So that could be done as an embedded component in TypeDB much more easily than the listener on the client side.
There's also another great question from Mark.
Ooh, two great questions coming in here. In SAP, there's a concept called model reference, can reference another calculation in a different environment. I see. I will say probably instrumenting communication across two type-to-be instances feels a little bit out of scope right now. What it feels a little bit more in scope and something we've talked about is either opening TypeDB to have something like extensions or plugins like Postgres does, so you could incorporate some things yourself, or having an ability to have a general function call over the web with a predefined API where you can say from a TypeDB query invoke a web call to another service where you can do whatever you want and respond whatever you want. And then you could set up this kind of bridge yourself. I think implementing, so in our mind, everything we build has to be general, pretty general for many users and usable across many systems. So kind of allowing extension of TypeDB or allowing web calls, I think, is the first step in that direction. But calling one TypeDB instance to another, I think, feels like a very niche use case right now. Have we seen the need for granular security controls? Aha. Right. So Ganesh? Oh no, Ganesh is not on chat. So I'll talk for now. But
I can let
uh,
Ganesh talk if you want.
you want to talk?
I'm sure
Yeah, I'll have
Ganesh
some
would love
water.
to.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, Ganesh, you've been promoted. He's on mute.
Hello,
So Ganesh is
can you guys
our
hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can. Ganesh is our head of architecture and running the TypeDB enterprise slash that's what runs in TypeDB cloud project and manages TypeDB cloud development. But granular or in general role-based access and stuff is going to be an enterprise level thing probably. And I think Ganesh, you probably have thought about this more than I have.
Yeah. So to answer this question, for the specific question that Eddie had, I think it's the kinds of control that lets you define permissions per entity and attribute. And whilst we've thought of this in the past, I think implementing role-based access to this level of granularity is slightly out of scope for now. We do have a plan to implement a more sophisticated role-based access than what we already have right now, which is quite simplistic, which lets you have different users have differing permissions at the database level, but not yet at the entity and attribute level, right, Josh? Because this is literally like the question is about like if you have like a list of say people associated with their IDs, then I want to have a TypeDB user only being able to access a set of IDs, a set of people that has an IDs prefix with say XXX. And that's out of scope, I think.
Um, Yes, I think going down to the instance level is a bit out of scope for what we will be providing, but I do think that we will be building the database level access controls and then potentially up to a type level access control, but we don't quite know what that looks like. So maybe that's as simple as you get it rejected if you access something in your query is accessing a type you're not allowed to access. But down to the instance, yeah, like Ganesh said, if you have a person with some email address and that's restricted, um, probably not yet. That's like row level access control in SQL, I guess.
Yeah,
We're not there yet, I think.
yeah,
Um, Whereas a table level one, which would be the SQL equivalent, we could do at the type level for us, and that seems more feasible.
yeah,
The other thing is that I wanted to highlight that TypeDB is very good for building access control um, levels. So you can very effectively build access control into your data model using TypeQL. And then you check as part of your query whether this user has the correct permissions to access this resource according to whatever functions you write or whatever restrictions you write. And that is in general how we encourage people to build permission systems in TypeDB right now. And in fact, we see that people often start with a core data model and then add a role-based access control on top to restrict access to certain parts of the database for certain users. So you build your users, then you build your roles, and you have your core model, and they mesh together. So that would be, I think, our recommended way of doing role-based access control down to the row and entity level um, on your side and in the data model. Good. We have a Q&A. Oh, David said, great, thank you. All right.
I think it's probably worth answering out loud that as well, though. Uh,
David, what was David's question?
David asked about our work on expanding and improving the docs,
Oh, yes.
and especially given LLM's propensity to generate nonsense code from what we already have. And I think it's a good question. And I've answered in text, but I'll happily let you have a ramble on that front. And you can also reference tutorials.
Um, Oh, yes, you responded in text. Yeah, so we are finding that wow, there's just seeing this long message. Okay, great. I will, Daniel, to host and panelists. Let me come back to that. So docs, yes, continuously improving docs. I think one of the reasons LLMs currently have a propensity to generate rubbish TypeQL codes is because they have been long trained on TypeDB 2 content and Kraken 1.0 content. And there's quite a bit of that in the internet. And what's happening is that I'm actually recently noticed a step change, which means I think they've improved or retrained on the current content that's on the website and in the docs. So they've got better, but now it's almost more of a hybrid. So I think we're going to get through this phase, I think, as more content is produced, more examples are produced, more repositories are released with examples of TypeQL. Um, and so there's a open question right now of whether we short circuit the, I don't know, 3 to 6 months it's going to take for the foundational models to catch up and parse the right version of TypeQL. And in that interim time, fine tune our own model with just TypeDB3 examples to force them into the right shape. Or we let that take its natural course, which I'm very confident will happen. Um, but right now, yeah, I think we try to basically provide examples in the system prompt to do a better job. And you can also use the more expansive reasoning models that tend to do a very good job. It's just for the sake of studio, we're trying to keep it interactive, so we reduce the reasoning time. But if you use a bigger model with more reasoning, they tend to get it right first time. It's just a speed trade-off. So if you're not on a latency sensitive application, it might be a great thing to use already. But yes, we will be writing a bunch more content and tutorials and examples as part of Project Elrond, Project Ecosystem, in the next months
And
and presumably for this foreseeable future, right?
forever, I think.
Yeah, I think we're going to be doing a lot of work in that direction to help everyone on board and get into it quickly and
And as
learn.
a brief response, Dan, I'll send you a message shortly in response to your last one.
All right. Daniel has sent a
That one's
do
a host and panelist one. I'll send it. Yeah, it's a lot of useful details. I'll send a message, Dan.
Okay, I would, yes, let's talk offline about um being help providing input into the standards committee for W3C WebAssembly. Okay. Would love to do that and try to make sure that it can also encompass TypeDB. Um, awesome. So where else? Any other questions? Other questions, exciting projects? Does anyone want to give a quick shout out to their own project that they're building and want to give a platform? Yeah, great question from Krishnan. Community contributions. We find, especially in the ecosystem, we're going to be looking forward to your contributions more and more. So especially we've seen the new Pydantic extension just now, this today, I think, being announced in our community, which is amazing. We welcome contributions also to Studio and drivers and console and stuff like that. We tend to be quite protective of TypeDB core, but if you're willing to iterate with us on a pull request to implement something that we think is generally useful, we're happy to put the time into getting your changes in as you need them and want them. The other model that we are thinking about is if it is in the language and the core, and if you want to make serious changes and you want to fork TypeDB and make serious changes, let's say someone wanted to swap in Foundation DB, I think, for RocksDB, and if that reaches a stable, mature point and we don't have the ability to mainline it for any reason into the core repository, then I think, would also be quite happy to promote that project or put a pointer to it in our resources. So generally, we just want to see any kind of usage in the community. But if you want to contribute to us, especially in the ecosystem side, build plugins and studio extensions and stuff like that, we really love to see it. Aha. Temporal queries. Yes. Get this question not infrequently, don't we, Callum?
Indeed.
So we have mm, let's do it two axes. We have native support for temporal queries as a question, and then we have modeling with temporal. So we have had users very successfully model temporal queries using TypeQL. So that has been relatively successful. We haven't looked necessarily at doing a kind of truly native integration with temporal data stores. And the reason for that is I think the architecture tends to look a little different, although I'm not too well versed in it. And I think there's a couple, I don't know who it is, but there's databases that allow Git-like forking operations and branching and stuff like that, which is, I think, super cool. Not something we've optimized for. One thing that is there in TypeDB 3 under the hood that we haven't, as talking about things we've done and not talked about or exposed yet, um, is we have time travel in the database right now. So TypeDB actually is versioned under the hood. It uses MVCC. The old versions are retained right now and they clean up at a certain point. And that will be configured. That will be configurable. But that would basically allow you to go back in time to a certain point, a previous version in the linear version of the TypeDB commits. And inspect the database and open a transaction at that point in time. So in terms of temporal, we don't have the native forking kind of temporal native kind of thing, I would say. We do support building temporal models pretty well, I would say, as well. And then we have this thing under the hood that's not really exposed yet, which is opening transactions at a specific point in time in the past, at a specific version in time in the past. And we haven't seen a whole lot of asks for it. That's not exposed yet, but it would be very easy for us to add to that API with just a timestamp or a version in the transaction options. David's question on like a data frame, for example, working with time series data. Ganesh, maybe you know better than I do what that is referring to. I'm not quite sure. You mean like a pandas data frame?
I think so, right? Is that right, David? You're talking about adding some kind of like a specific struct like data structure for data frame.
I'm not sure
So
how that relates to time series specifically, but one of the things we've done in 3.0 is the response format is now kind of like a row. One of the two is either a row or document.
I
And
think this is for like internally to actually define an attribute of type data frame so that you would be able to um, model, basically represent your time series data in a data frame. Is that right, David?
okay, that's interesting. Not out of the realm of possibilities. I hadn't considered like adding a specific attribute type for time series data. So that is something we could definitely consider and look at if we have a well-defined general specification for it. Um, but yeah, David, if you send me or Ganesh or into the general Discord server some specification of what a time series data frame generally looks like and what it supports, we could have a poke at it and see if that fits into our data model. Yeah, we are not averse to adding new data types and stuff like that in TypeQL. And it's just a question of, for instance, our attributes are immutable. So there's some interesting caveats that happen there. Excellent. Dixit, how about adding internal timestamps to data as it is loaded and then allowing querying internal timestamps? I know some databases do that. We don't do that. We tag data with a version number. So in theory, if we had a way to, as in it's versioned by the commit of the transaction, as the transaction commits, it's assigned a version number, and every piece of data in that commit is tagged with that version number. So um, we don't have the timestamp of the piece of data. It's not impossible to expose the version number that the data was created on, and then if in theory it's just adding a mapping from version to time, which is possible to do. We just haven't got that right now. And it's an interesting. I haven't thought about that before, so definitely thanks for flagging that. Do we have a timeline of when you might be able to expose MVCC-based temporal data in TypeQL? If it's a I think it should be as easy as adding a new transaction option when you open a transaction in TypeQL in the driver. So if that's something that is important to anyone and they want soon, it's probably not more than like a day or two of work to get it end-to-end and released. So that is one of the easier things that you guys have asked about today. We could definitely do that because it's already there. It's just not exposed as an option. But probably the easy version is by version number, so you have to know when the time corresponding to that is. And doing it by time might be a little more interesting. That might be doable on some scale as well. These are excellent questions.
Reza has another question on the engine.
All right, Q&A. Oh, nowhere? Open.
Yeah, in open questions in the Q&A.
Ah ha 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 ha. Yes. Okay. Several great questions. All right. Um, so from Reza, we have inference engines in 2.0. Declarative business rules engines that can run in 3.x. So yes, those of you that were with TypeDB and Kraken days, we went from 1.x to 2.x. One of the big reasons we did 1.x to 2.x was for performance. So we went from Java, Kraken over what do we have? Tinkerpop powered by Cassandra to a RocksDB implementation where we took control of the graph ourselves, still in Java, cleaned a lot of the implementation up, and we improved the rule engine. The problem we found with rule engines, so hold on to your thought for a sec, because we're not saying it's not going to come back. The problem with rule engines, like you said, is performance concerns. And I think the performance concern that happens is that because they can transparently generate a huge amount of work under the hood. It's not that they're intrinsically less performant than functions, but if you For functions, you have to explicitly invoke them and chain them yourself, which means you can see the work that's going to happen. So if anything, it's more of a user experience question. But that being said, the functions in 3.0 execute under the hood very similarly to rules in 2.0. So that it's not a crazy idea for us to support rules and functions, or some it's just like or one or the other. Right now we have functions, and we are seeing some use cases where the abstraction layers provided by rules are very useful. So we are still testing the hypothesis on functions. Keep giving us feedback on particular use cases where you find that the rules were much easier to use than functions. So please, yeah, we can start a thread on Discord in the discussion, in the help forum there. And please let's dump all of your examples of where you find rules to be extremely intuitive, because we are internally, a lot of our stuff, like IAM, for instance, access control works with functions. Recursion, pathfinding, looking at paths and reachability and stuff like that works very efficiently with functions and is very easy to write as well because it's just natural recursion. So you can write these recursive algorithms. That being said, certain things like building a abstraction of a data layer into another data layer using rules is really nice sometimes. So please, yeah, give us all the examples. We'd love to see them, and it gives us a lot of insight into what people are doing and what they need. Eddie, lots of question for graph algorithms. Excellent question. Yeah. So, um, mm, 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 mm. So we went through a phase of trying to distance ourselves from graphs very strongly, and that was one of the reasons because we don't do graph algorithms right now. That being said, it's a very natural conceptual model for TypeDB to think of it as a network or a graph, especially a hypergraph. So there's a world in which we bring in native graph algorithms. I think the one that probably has the most use case, to be honest, is shortest path. But if you have others also, so again, these kind of questions, if you have a collation of them or you have a set of them, please throw them in the Discord help forum, or email them to me, a collection of them. The more feedback we get, the better. Right now, we don't have analytics on our roadmap because we had them in 1.x and they are an extremely burdensome thing to maintain and integrate elegantly into TypeQL. So we had a whole analytics language in 1 point something, 1.6 or 7, maybe even 8, and it was really not as elegant as TypeQL ought to be. So maybe there's other ways to integrate it. For instance, having a Hadoop integration with TypeDB and then doing the user exposed and then having a way to do the analytics there and come back. But yeah, please ship your graph algorithm questions our way and we will explore them. This is so much good feedback. I love it. Seeing where people are thinking. Dixit says internal timestamp capability almost automatically allows you to support time series more fully. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I think there's actually a world in which we can just map the version number back to the timestamp, and keep track of that, and then it would be fine. It's interesting idea, Dixit. Yeah, I'll think about that. I'll think about that. Great. And yeah, Mark wants the animations back in the show. To be fair, I love animations.
I've already replied that yes,
I think it should be an option. Sometimes they were a bit much. Sometimes. So I think, do you want to talk about Studio future investment, Callum, a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we wanted to build Studio to be this very, very powerful and useful tool, but not just for engineers, but people who are not necessarily as technical. You know, our view is that TypeDB should be a very, very accessible database. As we know, the language is very much human readable, and we think there's a world where it can become much more accessible for many groups of people. And when you combine that visualization capability with the vibe querying, it can become even more accessible still. So we see a world where Studio just gets more and more feature rich based on the use and response we see. So we basically at the moment we built that version 1 and then we invest on a basis of how much do we see people wanting more of this? And it's, as Josh keeps raising, is a lot of what we're doing is just we're investing very heavily based on market pull now, which is a change from how we previously operated. So the more we see engagement, interest, and activity in a space, the more we think about it.
Oh ho, Daniel, these are excellent questions. Yeah, so someone has tripped up on our Bazel build system. So Bazel is in our world a good build system for our multi-language repositories, particularly, and it orchestrates everything from tests to documentation generation to uh, synchronizing repositories. At least it used to. We took that out, but to validation of check styles and dependencies to release orchestration and testing artifacts that have been released. So we use Bazel in many ways, and I think it's been a long-term investment in the company that we don't intend to get rid of. That being said, with recognition to what you said about using Cargo and Rust, we actually are running a dual build system in all of our Rust repositories. So um, maybe we should make that clear in the READMEs. Maybe Ganesh, maybe can you take a note of that, please? So you should be able to build, develop, and contribute to TypeDB using your standard Rust toolchain and Cargo and all of that. So because we basically automatically generate the Cargo Rust side of the project from the Bazel side, and if we get an open source contribution on just the Cargo build side of things, and it requires modifying the build and infra, we would be very happy to do that extra 5% of work to update our Bazel infrastructure to incorporate that and then regenerate the cargo build side. But I don't see a short-term or medium-term world in term where we get rid of all the orchestration and automation that we have from Bazel. Bazel is one of those things where it's like a crazy amount of investment up front, which we did years ago, and then you have things that are automatic and stable and pretty self-sufficient for quite a long time. So yeah, I understand it's not popular in the Rust world as much, which makes sense because of how complicated it is. So that's why we try to hit both with the Bazel first, Rust, Cargo dual setup. Yogi says, it's an interesting idea to invoke Bazel from Cargo. Yeah, it's still up for debate, I guess. It's just given how much of our company has invested in Bazel across all of our repositories, which has decreasing weight, for instance, in the cloud platform is not Bazel built right now. So it's not very good for the web platforms. But that's a fair point. It might be possible. We just have a lot of expertise in Bazel now, so we're pretty efficient. And I'm hoping that we can make it clear to people that you can use Cargo or Bazel for building all of our repositories. Dixit has sent a question. Is there an SQL to TypeQL connector out there? Aha. Interesting. We haven't got any general SQL or Cypher to TypeQL systems out there. It's actually potentially an interesting research project, I think, for a undergrad type of level. In my mind, it would probably be a couple of months project to assess the equivalence and then build some mapping. I think we're reaching the point where TypeQL, Cypher, and SQL have equivalent expressivity. I think, for instance, we need the optionality that is coming next week. So it should be, in theory, possible to map from them to TypeQL, but we haven't personally done that research and investment right now. But I do think we are starting to move in the direction of maybe allowing or having ways for LLMs to automatically translate these like a SQL or labeled property graph model into TypeDB in a naive way, and then you can improve it without having the benefits of TypeDB up front, but then you get it as you use more of TypeDB's features with the type system. But that was always our philosophical argument against uh, providing native migration from SQL to and graph to TypeDB is that you don't get the benefits of TypeDB when you do that. But I think now with LLMs doing a lot of the heavy lifting, I think you can do a lot just with that one LLM in the middle doing the translation. Oh yes, thanks, Sam. We are using Bazel in the cloud platform, but it's abstracted away from the front end. Got it. Yeah, so we still use Bazel for releases and building the backends, right? It's pretty good and solid for Java and C++ and Rust. It's pretty solid on those. Python's also okay these days. Wow, this is a can we take a record of all these questions, Callum? Can we just copy them all out? These are such good questions.
I think we can.
Probably I used to do webinars with the company 4 or 5 years ago, and this is probably the most serious set of questions and hard and like deep questions I've encountered along the way.
I mean, I
So
was
that's
thinking that we
excellent.
don't actually need to be doing an introductory talk. We could just do Q&A in the future.
I know. Or if I was about to make a video about what is TypeDB in for YouTube, but I guess then we can do like how you build TypeDB with Bazel and Cargo, and how you connect to a timestamp system. Wow, that flew the hour. Okay. Any other questions?
Doesn't look.
Anything goes. No such thing as a silly question here.
I think the other thing to reinforce, as we've said, is we're here for all of this. I mean, we want as much of this as we can, and you can see that it's already sparking, ideas on things that we should or could be doing.
Yeah.
And please reach out to us on Discord, on LinkedIn, or on email. Just throw these things at us. This is what we're here for. We're building TypeDB to be something amazing, and that's how we do it.
I'm actually serious, Callum. Can we just copy all these questions out? Because I think I don't want them to get lost when we close
Already
this.
done it.
All right, cool.
Chucked in
Thanks.
I've chucked in our community channel.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to do one more questions to the community, just to check, right? Has there anyone amongst you that tried to contribute to any repositories in TypeDB in some way, but got stuck because of the difficulty of as to how to contribute? Well, there hasn't been anything on the chat, so I assume that's a no.
I will. Oh yes. Hi,
Oh
Mom.
yeah, the
Yes,
yeah,
the
the
Julia
Julia
client
command.
is coming back. Love that project being revived and with new contributors as well. So yeah, excellent place to contribute is building new drivers. We are happy to facilitate as much as possible. You can go directly from our protobuf. You can go directly from our Rust driver if it's Rust compatible with your language. You can go directly. We have rebuilt our drivers using Rust and then an FFI layer and then Java and Python on top. So they're not re-implementing the whole network stack. So you can also use that FFI layer if there's a Swig generator for your language, you can plug into that there. That's what we use. So that's awesome. Or if those are not feasible for you, you can also write an HTTP-based API driver to talk to TypeDB, which is something we added this year as well. So that's how Studio runs. It uses the HTTP TypeScript driver, which replaced our old gRPC driver. And yeah, we would love to see more of all of these things. Yeah, definitely. Great place to contribute. Another thing, a good time. I think we should talk. Daniel and Ganesh and I should get on a call. I think there's so many great questions. Another thing that we did 2 years ago, I believe, at the start of the when it was at the beginning of the 3.0 rewrite or at some point around then, to help contributors and all of that, is we switched our core license from AGPL to MPL, Mozilla public license. And that removes the need for a contributor license agreement, something like that. But also, I believe, yeah, I think we did that research back then. But also basically means that organizations that were worried about having AGPL code in their systems now no longer need to be worried because MPL is more free for use than AGPL. But yeah, so we have Mozilla in all of our core as our license, and then we have Apache for all of the consumable libraries like drivers and console and all of our examples, I think, are Apache as well. So basically, everything outside on the second layer is Apache, and the core is Mozilla to provide feeds feeds to contribute code back as you change it. So to answer Daniel's questions, can you re-implement TypeQL syntax using so it is currently a pest grammar, by the way. Um, mm, mm, mm. Tailor the query language to be easy enough for teachers and educators to use. So first of all, I would like to talk to you about what you think needs simplifying, because I would love to see if we can mainline that. But also, yes, I think uh, I would love that. I mean, you can, in theory, always re-implement the query language. I don't know how one secures an idea. Don't know if there's a, I don't know, do people copyright grammars? I have no idea. Anyway, but yeah, feel free and put it in the open source. Sounds good to me. And let's talk about it. If we can mainline it into TypeQL's repository, any kind of productive discussion, I think that would be amazing. Awesome. Any other business? Benchmarking to really demonstrate, yes, data loading time and schema. It's true, we should show the schema in the TPCC benchmark. There will be more benchmarking coming down the pipe next year. I think we'll probably do another push on benchmarking and performance after the ecosystem has been a bit more fleshed out. So I think we'll be revisiting a bunch of that sometime next year. I also want to highlight that as a team and as a company, we're super flexible and we're very adaptable. So, I mean, as new things come up and we see great ideas, we will rapidly switch into implementing those or adopting those tasks. So, that's why it's so important for us to get as much input as possible and to communicate as much as possible. The other thing I want to do is I want to shout out our team. I think who do we have here? We have Krishnan, we have Ganesh, we have Yogi. I think we have a couple and Sam. So we have a couple of them. And they're super friendly. We pride ourselves on our community and are loving to seeing all the interactions between you as well. So the Julia guys met up to form their implementation group, and just generally seeing everyone help each other. So the more of that, the merrier, and we're always super enthusiastic to help. And in particular, been seeing our team also enjoy it. So, yeah, we love hanging out with you guys and helping. Sweet. All right. I think this might be a good time, right, Callum?
I think it might indeed. We've lasted an hour and 20 out of the hour. Aha.
Hey, you might have a new Julia group recruit there, Mark. Look at that.
It's a host of panelists, someone can't see it.
Yeah, Paul, you'd message that just to us. If you switch that to send it to everyone, then you could maybe meet up with Mark, but I believe Mark is at Mark in the Discord server. I think he's just Mark, right?
Give me a moment. Yeah.
No, yes, he is dot
At
Sayun dot. Anyway, contact Paul Doxy Reed Julia. If you want to drop some contacts there or something, that would be great. Or if you email me, Joshua at typedb.com, I can put you in touch with Mark, or the other way around. If you both email me, that'll be easy. Love it. There we go. This was maybe the most beneficial thing that came out of that is putting people in touch. That's lovely.
Uh, as to where the recording goes, we'll have to figure that out afterwards, rather.
Yes, so my instinct is definitely the first half at least will probably go on YouTube, right, Callum? And then we have to decide whether the other half goes on YouTube or not.
I think, I mean, yeah, I think we'd largely put the presentations on the Q&A. We could put some part of the community. I think, yeah, we can just decide how we want to do this.
Yeah. Or we just send a meeting link to everyone that a recording to everyone that came, so it's not out in the public.
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable approach.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, to echo your same remarks, this has been great. Like, I like the depth of question and interest. This is exactly what we want to see, and shows that this was probably a good thing for us to do.
If you guys ever want to do anything to help us out, so write about TypeDB on any platform. That would be wonderful to see. Awesome. Okay. If anyone, sorry, one more thing. If anyone's in London and wants to meet up with, say, Callum or Ganesh in person, also welcome. And if anyone's in New York, where I am, please hit me up as well.
Indeed. I'm very happy to meet up in person and have met a couple of you in person on here. But if we get enough interest, like I said, we'll host an evening or an afternoon in a pub or a cafe where we can have some discussion.
Fantastic.
Thank you all. This has
Right.
been
Thank you, everyone.
very interesting. I think it's on me to end the stream.
It might be on you to end it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you all are. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.